I think in the early years of Tayyip Erdogan's premiership, there was a lot of very good progress that was made here in Turkey, where I happened to be staying for a few days. I think that there was a credible approach from Turkey to become a candidate member of the European Union. We began the accession negotiations while I was here. There was a lot of economic reform, rapid growth, stable currency. A lot of things were going very well in the early years. And it began to fall apart probably 8 or 9 years ago, I'm afraid, characterized by several things. But one was the falling out of the Fethullah Gülen movement, the movement that is run by the self-exiled preacher who lives in Pennsylvania, and President Erdogan's AK Party. And since then, it's been very fraught between the two of them. And in the last year or so, we've begun to see some of the old fragility of the Turkish economy returning.
So do you consider the current situation to be self-inflicted via President Erdogan? And is it possible for him to dig the country out of this current predicament, particularly when you consider that he is telling his citizens they must buy the currency to prop it up? It's very hard for international investors to have any form of confidence in the currency.
Well, I think that is a problem. Before the elections, which President Erdogan and his party won handily back in June, his ministers were saying once these elections are over, there will be a credible program of economic reform to address some of the structural problems we've got, high inflation, a declining currency, weak current account balances, all those different issues, very high level of indebtedness in foreign currencies, which is a dangerous thing for an emerging economy. But the problem is that since the president won and since he's formed a new government, the markets haven't seen those changes and those signs of reform that they would like. And we've now got a number of things going wrong, exacerbated by what I think is probably an avoidable spat with the United States government, given that there was some sign of a strong personal relationship between President Erdogan and President Trump. So I think it's a mixture of both some economic weaknesses which have been building up for a while, and a political spat with the United States coming at a time which put together have led to this really very damaging run on the Turkish lira in the last few days.
What I'm trying to understand, Ambassador, is how it ends. I mean, Argentina faced a similar problem. It got this attack on its currency, but then it went to the IMF for a bailout with all sorts of conditions. It doesn't feel like that's where Erdogan is going, especially with the United States as the biggest shareholder in the IMF. It would be pretty embarrassing for him to have to go to a bailout. So how does this end?
Well, it would be embarrassing. It's also a bit of a problem because he seems to be ruling out some of the orthodox economic medicine that an economy in this stage would take. He's made a number of speeches saying it's all a foreign plot, we're not going to increase interest rates to deal with the problems of inflation, and so on. In fact, there are a number of things that they could have done, particularly like putting up interest rates, which would have, I think, helped stabilize the markets. But now it's contaminated by a spat which is about America demanding the release of one particular U.S. national, Pastor Brunson. But the U.S. government also is worried that some of its employees from the United States Consulate General in Istanbul are still imprisoned. And the Turks are very upset because they feel equally aggrieved about the imprisonment of a senior banker from Halkbank in the United States for what they regard as not trumped-up charges, but if you like, something less than normal legal process. So it's unfortunate that it's there. If there was a way in which the the U.S.-Turkey spat could be diffused, and if the Turkish government took some of the more obvious orthodox measures to address these economic problems, then I think you could see a way out. But rushing to the IMF, if you're not going to do a reform program, doesn't look very likely. And capital controls would be very destructive as well, because Turkey is very reliant on inflows of foreign capital and foreign investment.